So what do we work on here? Oh yeah, gradient on a stroke. This is a really nice effect and it's really quick and easy to set up too. Let's see exactly what's going on by hiding a few layers here and locking this layer here. This is a stroke. We get a really nice rounded edge and it is vector, so it stays crisp no matter how much we zoom into it. Change our width. We can get some different looks. Okay, and let's look at the effects here. So we've got the outline here creating most of the effect. I've added a bevel and emboss just because it has a nice lighting effect. We could turn that off. So you could see we do have this gradient fall off and it matches the curve nicely. And then I've added a bit of a shadowing effect and a glow effect, but this is the main bulk of the effect here. And this is what we're gonna make. And for those of you that aren't easily impressed and are wondering what more can we do with this, there is more. Let's just get that out of the way. And if you want to taper this, that is definitely an option. So the first thing we need is a stroke. I'm just going to click and drag, click and drag. I have a stroke. It's very thick, so you probably want a really wide stroke. If you don't have one, just drag the slider here. Once you get to 100, you can mouse over here and use a scroll wheel, shift scroll wheel to go really fast. Something like this will work. Let's go in here. We want to find our effects, and the first thing is to turn on your outline effect and then hit the cog so we see all the settings. In this one, we want to set this from solid color to contour. Now we're going to get a gradient, but it's just really small. So let's drag this out here, and it's going outside. So I'll click this button, set it to inside. I'm just going to drag this up till right when it collapses and we don't see any of the base color. So I'll click in here and use the arrows because I don't want it to go much further than that. So that's the base of the effect. Pretty simple, right? And we could edit this. It's a gradient. We can add points because it's also a stroke. So a lot of nice stuff. The only thing to look out for is if we have a really sharp angle, it's going to break apart. If we have a sharp turn at the end here, that's going to look a little bit weird. Try to mind that, but you got a lot of control. Now what I want to do is just make it look a little bit more interesting. Now, if you deselect your stroke, you'll see something that I don't really like. It's a bit of a sharp edge right in the middle. So I want to see if I could fix that. I'm going to go back to my outline, click on my gradient, and I'm going to take this middle point and drag this over here. That's looking a lot nicer. Okay, so let's talk about color here. I'm going to click somewhere around here so I have another stop. And with this selected, I'm going to click on my color. We can make it an orange color or whatever works for you. And then I'm going to come over here, select this one, and I'm going to make that a bright yellowish color. That's working pretty good. Now I just have to go back and make some adjustments here. Let's move this in a little bit. I'm going to look at this midpoint, get that to where it looks right. This midpoint, let's fix this up again. Okay, so we got a pretty nice look with the gradient. And now I'm going to go to Bevel and Emboss. But before that, I'm going to double click somewhere on the curve so I can get a little bit more detail. Just be careful to make sure everything is smooth. Okay, so Bevel and Emboss, let's turn that on. And the first thing I'm going to do is go from pillow to inner. Then what I'm going to do is click on screen. I'm going to set this to normal, bring the opacity to 100%. Same thing, normal, 100%. Now what we want to do is adjust the radius, get it looking bigger. You could try adjusting the soften. That'll blur things out a bit. I'll leave that as it is for now. We want to look at this section here. That will control the light angle. So get it to a spot that looks all right. Now what we want to do is change these colors. Click on this color. We could do a red here, something to match the background, or we could do something that will stand out from the background. I'm going to go with something like this. That works pretty well for me. Now let's look at the highlight color. Find something that works. All right, I kind of like that. And this might be a little bit harsh, so I'm going to take my soften, bring that up 20 is the slider limit, but I'll click in here, hold on shift and scroll wheel up. I don't want it to go too far. Something like that I think looks good. Also, if it's still too harsh, you can go from normal here and set this to something like lighten, pin light. I'm going to keep it at normal. You also have the option to drag this down, or if you want, you could just make it lighter by adjusting the color. Okay, so I'm happy with that. The rest is just some minor details. So adding an outer glow, this thing looks like it should be casting light, right? So let's bring the radius up. We could drop the intensity down. Let's change the color, something that matches this. All right, that works pretty well. I might drop the opacity just a bit here. Now this is pretty optional, but you could add an outer shadow. So let's bring the radius up again, bring the intensity up, adjust the offset. This looks pretty harsh now. Let's take the intensity down and let's adjust the color, something that's a little bit more in the red area. Now we've got this set to multiply. I'm going to set this to normal just so I could see things more clearly. And then when I make my color adjustments, it'll be a little bit easier to see what's going on. Darker than the background, but not very dark. That way it'll keep things subtle. If we want, we could push the radius down. We could lower the intensity. We could take the offset down. We could lower the intensity. We could come up to the radius. If your radius is too low, it's going to be sharp. I think 100 is pretty good. You could adjust the opacity. All right, so that works for the effects. Now let's take a look at adjusting the pressure. I could take the stroke size down if I want to. Now, if I go too far down, you're not going to be able to really see things, but at this size, it works well. If I come into pressure, I'll click somewhere in the middle, and then I'll take the ends and drag down. Now we've got this tapering effect. Click here to add extra points. Just note that sometimes it's going to look a little bit weird if this graph isn't very smooth. You can see you got some pretty decent flexibility here. And I think this is a pretty fun effect. Now, here's the thing you got to look out for. If it gets too sharp, you're going to have those issues. So if that's the case, you could always come in here and try and smooth things out. Right click on a point if you ever need to delete it. The biggest issue is you got to be careful of the bends. You can see the bend works pretty good for this tapered line here, but in this thick area, if I add sharp bends, you'll see the effect is going to break down and you might get some weird artifacts in the middle. Just try and avoid that. If you do need sharp corners like this, you'll just have to taper things down in that area. All right, so let's go back to pressure. Let's hit reset. The other thing that you got to worry about is this doesn't want to overlap itself because it's just going to morph together. Let's kind of fix this up here. And we'll take this. So once this shape comes over here, you see it's going to merge into itself. And that might be the look that you're going for. But if you do get that, you might have to come in here, go to the width. If I bring this up, you can see the gap is getting bigger. If I take this down, you can see that we can reduce that gap until you get to a point that you like. If you're going for this kind of merged together look, that's great. Otherwise, you probably just want to keep this separate. Also note that if I did want a bigger width, I would just have to come into my outline here, click on the settings, adjust the radius of that. We bring this down. Yeah, it's getting farther apart. When we bring this up, and again, I just want to bring this up until this closes. That's it. If I bring it too far, we're going to soften out the effect. Just a few different ways to work on this. I think this is an excellent effect that could be used very easily. Let's say we want to apply this to another stroke. All we need to do is select this one, go to edit, copy. You can see it's going off the screen, but it's Control C, works the same. And then we select this stroke and we go to edit. And it's also going off the screen, but paste effects or Alt Shift V, that will paste the effect. And we just need to go to the outline, adjust the radius if our stroke isn't the right size. That's how you can create this neon gradient on stroke effect. And I think you could do some really interesting things with this.